My next guest is a supersonic trial and defense attorney. He is seen on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, the BBC, you name it. He is outspoken, he is a handful, he is brilliant. He is the partner at Reed Smith. He is A. Scott Bolden. Scott.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. I have to admit, I am equally as excited to have you here as I am scared.
You're way too kind. You're way too kind.
I know that
It's
your
gonna be a
mind thinks
friendly
so
interview.
fast.
It's going to be a friendly interview. I'm looking forward to it.
Of course it will be. So I know that you are considered an authority in law and civil rights, and I want to kind of get to that. But before we talk present day, I want to kind of go backward for a second and talk about the origin. Right. So I read that you grew up in Joliet, Illinois,
Yeah.
and you have these two dynamic parents.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
so talk to me about your childhood and what that was like.
Well, my dad was a lawyer, later a judge, but he was the only lawyer in Will County for 20 plus years. And he was the only person I knew growing up that wore a shirt and tie to the office. And so growing up, I wore a shirt and tie in high school, in college, and law school. My friends thought I was crazy.
Yes.
But I wanted to be just like him. My dad was everything to me. I became a lawyer because I grew up watching him try cases all over the state of Illinois. He was a criminal defense lawyer and a civil rights defense lawyer, and very active in the movement, civil rights movement in
So what
Illinois.
kinds of things, when you talk about him being active in the movement, like what kind of things did you observe him doing?
He was the president of the NAACP in Will County. He was active at the NAACP at the state level. I have vivid memories of being 3 and 4 years old, desegregating schools and restaurants and protest and eating watermelon with a protest sign, picketing, the school board in Will County, and just, having a consciousness about the race question made me comfortable about the race question growing up. I knew the difference between black and white, but I also knew that I was treated differently because of the color of my skin and the melanin in my skin. But I also was raised by two parents who gave me a fearlessness about being successful. And a sense of right and wrong and a sense of fairness and equality and justice.
Nice.
And that's remained with me over 61 years. Of course, Morehouse certainly helped that a lot. Training ground for leadership for black men, the only institution in the world that does that. Howard Law and its legacy in the civil rights movement trained me to be a lawyer. And then my journey to the DA's office to hone my trial skills.
So let me ask you this, because I want to make sure that I capture the beginning. So tell me, if you can, because I'm going to come back to the whole journey. But when you consider yourself as a boy, maybe even a young teen, how would your family and friends have described you at that time?
Rambunctious, full of life. I was a bit of a jokester. I had a consciousness about my intelligence, and I thought I was a handsome kid.
Even at that time?
My narcissism started early.
Okay.
I was a bit mannish when it came to women, and I had a great relationship with my mother.
And she was extraordinary also, because I read that she ran a number of different businesses, right?
Yep, she did. And the first business she ran was my father's law practice. She didn't go to college, and they got married very young, and Dad was coming out of the University of Illinois Law School, and when he went into his private practice, she was his first assistant. And before that, she worked with the Social Security Administration, and she would eventually go back to school when we got older to get her undergraduate degree and get a master's degree in Black history and sociology. And she would run several businesses, including the college access program for young underprivileged kids in Will County. She would sit on the housing board. She was an activist in her own right, and her and my dad were partners in the civil rights movement. They were. I have vivid memories of my father being harassed by the FBI and the police and white supremacists. This was in the late 60s,
So when you
early
say you
70s.
had vivid memories of that, what specifically do you remember? Do you remember conversations? Do you remember phone calls? What do you, or was it really more of a feeling?
I remember the day Dr. King was killed. And we were in the streets rioting, or black people were all over the country, including in Joliet, primarily the students, and the police, and my father and ministers leaving the house and going to try to quell the students, quell the rioting, the burning, negotiating with the police on how best. I remember my father's enemies being at the back of the house and throwing rocks and busting our windows. I remember harassing phone calls to my mother the night of the riots. And I remember at a very young age, my mother gathering me and my brother and sister in the den and, you know, talking to us about what may happen. I remember her on the phone with the FBI asking for protection and asking and telling the FBI director for the Chicago field office that if one negative thing happened to that curly-haired black man, Ray Bolden, that there was going to be hell to pay. And I remember her gathering us while all this was going on the first night of the riots. I remember, you know, her having her protection and telling us as young kids that if, you know, if they got in the house and they came in the house and, you know, they brought harm to her, that we were to, you know, go down fighting.
Yeah. That's a lot.
That's a lot for an 8-year-old.
Yeah, it's a lot for a
those
child.
were the times
Yeah.
in the late 60s, early 70s. Still, you know,
Yeah.
Illinois, a third of Illinois is below the Mason-Dixon line. And so there was still a lot of racism outside, in Chicago and outside of Chicago. And, you know, I have vivid memories of it, which shaped and defined my life and my commitment to fighting racism in this country. Even being at a big law firm, you know, I experienced racism early on in high school, being called the N-word and wanting to go to Morehouse College because it was a training ground for leadership.
Right.
And wanting, you know, at the same time, my father had a real sense of justice and equality, and we were not allowed to talk bad about people who didn't look like us, because that made us as bad as they were.
Wow.
We were fighting for justice, but that wasn't a fair fight.
Yeah.
If we said something bad about someone who did not have the same melanin in our skin. And so the race question, the race issue, is a huge part of my life, being, and my development.
Yeah, it makes sense because you, at 8 years old, were really in the center of it. Whereas, you know, most children at that age are sheltered from all the bad stuff in life, you know, so you got to see it having a front row seat,
and a lot of people
unfortunately,
believe, because my father was a lawyer in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, that somehow I grew up privileged, if you will. And the reality is that we didn't. My father didn't make a whole lot of money. He was a sole practitioner. Well, we didn't want for anything. I mean, we were probably a working class family, but I saw a lot of poverty around us.
Yeah.
Because everyone who I played with either didn't have a father in their household, or their father was in jail, or their parents worked and struggled to make ends meet by working at the factory or the prison. And so it was an incredible juxtaposition, you know, this life of mine. Although I grew up with working class and poor kids, I had a sense that my father was different, special, because he wore a shirt and tie, and he was very well respected as a lawyer, despite him fighting for justice, freedom, and equality. My father was very well respected by white lawyers and judges and the police and the mayor, who he would often oppose, because he was brilliant, he was smart, and he had a biting sense of humor that made you smile.
Who does that sound like?
Yeah, I got that
like
from
maybe A. Scott Bolden.
I can bite, and it takes you maybe 20, 30 seconds to know I bit you, but once you realize it, it's a delayed response. But, you know, he loved being a lawyer. He loved doing justice. He read a book about, he was homeless. He grew up homeless for about 2, 3, 4 years.
And was he originally from Joliet also?
He was from Chicago.
Chicago, okay.
And he was adopted or had parents, Dylan and Lillian, and they raised him in Joliet, and then his grandfather came to get him. But he read a book. Dylan gave him a book about Thurgood Marshall. And he read this book, and he was so fascinated by it that he wanted to become a lawyer. And I often think about Thurgood's impact on Black America, or America generally, with a number of Black lawyers who read his life story and became lawyer.
Yeah.
And my father would often tell me that he wanted me to be better than him because I had more opportunities. But he was really
So tell
awesome
me a little
guy.
bit about that, you know, after age 8 and beyond, what were the dreams that you had for yourself? Because as you mentioned, you have this juxtaposition, right, where in your household you're seeing your father wearing the suit and tie, and then you go out and you see a completely different perspective on life. So what were you thinking you could become at that time?
I was always ambitious. I knew Joliet was not where I was going to end up. I wanted to get out of Joliet. I watched TV and saw Max Robinson and, you know, Black actors and shows, and, you know, I always wanted it all. There was a period where I didn't believe my mother and father were ambitious enough. And I was far more ambitious than them.
And this
I realized
is when you have these powerhouse parents and you think you're
yeah, it was weird. It was weird. My father was so brilliant. I thought he should be rich and famous and like the people I saw on TV, and I realized he was homeless, and he grew up homeless for a period of time, and he went to the military and had a JD and an undergraduate degree, and now he was this big-time lawyer and judge eventually, and I didn't fully appreciate that the way I did, and I did a lot of work on myself and the scars of racism that I've experienced to realize just what a powerful and loving influence he was on me. He was everything to me.
Yeah.
So growing up, I had those big dreams. I wanted to be a big fish in a big pond, and my mother realized it. My mother narrated my journey to manhood. My father taught me how to be a man, and they both still live in me.
What do you mean by your mother narrated?
She would narrate and tell me about what it meant to be a man, that you cannot call your father and me every time something doesn't work out. That, boy, baby, you're special, and you're going to do special things out here. And that you're far more ambitious than me, your mother, your father, your brother and sister. You want it all, baby boy, and I'm going to support you. We're going to support you in getting there, but you remember 2 things, right? That Joliet's not the center of the universe, and don't forget where you came from. But she also would say, but when you get there, when you get there, wherever you want to be at the top of the game, wherever you get there, right? You act like you belong there. You don't act like you're glad to be there.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That is so powerful.
And that contributes to my confidence. I mean, Morehouse accentuated it and magnified it, but I've always had this love supreme for myself. It sustains me. And I've also always had a lot of confidence in myself. I built a multi-million-dollar law practice my way in big law, and I never doubted it. I never looked back. I made mistakes along the way. It was non-traditional, but I'm still
on
here.
that, let me pursue that a little bit. So on this journey where you have all of these challenges, right, were there 2 or 3 moments that you can remember and think about that were challenges for you, where you had to say to yourself, you know what, at this time, I have to own my greatness, where you're remembering what your mom said to you, Like, you know what? At this time, I'm not going to play with you guys. Like, I'm serious and I'm coming.
Well, going to a big law firm, I had a lot of challenges. I failed the New York bar the first time. I improved by 50 points and passed it the second time. After every failure in my life has come success, and after every success has come failure. It evens me out emotionally. I failed contracts my first year of law school. I wasn't recruited by any big law firm. When I moved from New York to D.C., not one black partner at a big law firm would return my phone calls. In fact, one very well-known one told me that there was nothing on my resume that indicated that I would ever be successful in big law, and that, there really wasn't anything he could do for me, that I should go back to the government. When I got to Reed Smith, I knew I failed contracts, but I did so well in the interviews that they never really checked my grades, and they gave me a job. And the recruitment partner just didn't work that hard, and he said, "Oh, don't worry about the grades. I came in as a third or fourth year associate." Had they looked at my transcript and saw that F, I probably wouldn't have gotten that job. 32 years later, having generated multiple millions of dollars over 30 years, it's not that I wasn't an excellent student. It was excellence is all around us. I had my moment in that class. I had that moment when I failed the bar, but the Lord will take you down before he brings you up. You can't appreciate and celebrate the successes in your life without failure.
Yes.
It's what you do after you fail that defines your success in your future.
Yeah.
I was just at the Southeast Tennyson Learning Center talking to about 50 plus kids about loving themselves and how loving yourself and being great no matter what your circumstances are in Southeast Washington, it's what you do with failure that defines your future, not the failure itself. And I've never let failure do that. I mean, I built my law practice with no framework, just a skill set, and the idea that if I was the greatest litigator God ever created, somebody had to know my name. And so part of my development of my book of business was not just the skill set I got in New York prosecuting bad guys, but that I had the ability to ask for the business and to sell myself confidence, competence, and just a comfortability with clients.
Yeah.
Because when they're in trouble or they're being sued for a large amount of money, there's a lot more going on than just being a great lawyer. And so
Scott, let me ask you this, because this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you today, is that you are this kind of intriguing person, right? Like,
you think?
Yes. You are the I'm going to take no prisoners, super scary, don't play with me person. But then you're also charming and you're generous and you're loyal. So where does all of that, where do those traits originate?
Probably my mother and father. They were very giving because they were leaders in their community. I helped my enemies, and I love my enemies. My father did. My mother's big.
What do you mean by that, I help my enemies?
Well, because for your enemies to come to you and need you, whether for their family or financially or otherwise, it takes a lot if they've wronged me in the past. The biggest argument my mother and father would have wasn't about their relationship. It was about my father doing free work. Well, people who he had represented and helped and saved their liberty or their money or their families, and they never paid him for it, whether it was because they couldn't afford it or because they just didn't want to, right? There was a lot of jealousy in our community. There's a lot of jealousy around me, and a lot of haters and what have you, and that's okay. I wouldn't be successful without them. I love my enemies. I love my haters because I got to stay focused on my blessings. And the Lord has blessed me with a great deal. I tell my enemies and haters all the time, you know, if you focus less on me and focus on you, you might catch some of your own blessings. You're missing your blessings, focusing on me, you know. And the other thing is, haters never come right at you. They come around you. You know, they they talk about you with others, somehow believing it's not going to get back to you, or maybe they wanted to get back to you. But those are distractions. I got to stay focused. You know, I got to pay bills. I got to provide for my family. I have to lead my community. I understand my leadership. I understand who I am. I'm a history-making lawyer that happens to be African American in big law, and I give back a great deal financially and with my time. I know who I am and who I'm not, and I'm not afraid of either.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of either. I'll tell you all about my failures and my what I don't do well in life, you know? But I'm me. And you know,
talk to me a little bit more about your philosophies. It's obvious that you are extremely successful, but are there certain philosophies that you kind of think about, or maybe not even consciously, but maybe subconsciously, that you think about on a regular basis that help you to be successful?
No, too many. I've given you a few of them. You know, trust but verify is one of my favorites. You know, just because they don't like you or just because you believe they're after you or just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you.
Okay.
You got to always be looking around the corners. My good friend Greg Nixon, my frat brother, always says, Scott, you always got to be looking around the corners.
And this
that's where it's
fraternity
coming
is
from. Kappa Alpha Psi.
Of course it is.
Fraternity Incorporated, of course the Boule, you know, of course the Guardsmen. I mean, you know, those are all my friends and my board of directors.
Yeah, it's interesting because I attended an event where you were honored recently, and one of the things that struck me was just this group of friends that you have that go back decades.
Oh, yeah.
That were there to support you, and they all love you. So you have this take no prisoners part of you, and you're tenacious, but it was obvious to me that you are also giving of yourself such that people come back to you in the same way that a piece of metal would to a magnet, right?
My friends will tell you that Scott's not everybody's cup of tea, or that I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but he'll give you the shirt off his back if you need him. And I will. And when I talk about enemies, I'm talking about non-friends, but, you know, listen, I've been very blessed. And I've got far more than what I could ever do with, you know? And if I can share, you know, my life with others, if I can support them at any level, I will, because, you know, Lorna, we're all trying to get to heaven.
We're all trying to make it.
We're all trying to get to heaven. And I surely hope I don't have to negotiate my way in. I probably will. But I believe that God is a forgiving God. I've done my best. I've done my best.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Lorna Gross Enchanted Life and Style. And if you want to learn a little bit more about my interior design work, my travel experiences, my book, or speaking engagements, you can go to lornagross.com or connect with me on Instagram at Lorna Gross Designs. So let's switch gears for a second here and let's talk style. So you are one of the most stylish people that I've met. Like, you always have a sense of style. Where does that emanate from?
You know, you go to Morehouse College. You go with cats from all around the world. And the average student comes from 500 miles away, from Detroit, New York, LA, Chicago, and in between. And you know, you got Spelman across the street. Those young women in the 80s used to go to class in chiffon dresses. I'm sorry, you know, I'm talking to y'all class of 84. They know who they are. So, you know, my sense of style comes from competition. You know, you had to dress good and look good to get a date with a Spelman woman. And you had a lot of men around you who were dressing just as well from more urban centers. And so, you know, from Atlanta and elsewhere. So, you know, competition created this style for me. Now, my friends from New York and D.C. used to always call me a Bama because I had my own sense of style that wasn't consistent with theirs. It's okay. Greg Taylor, I'm talking to you. Steve Coleman, I'm talking to you. You know, these cats were from D.C. They were just dressing strong, you know.
Right.
But I think over the years, my style's become more sophisticated. I describe my style as subtle sophistication. I'm still a lawyer. I still have to have a certain conservative life or brand or style from when I wear a suit or a shirt and tie. All of my clothes, my work clothes, are tailor-made. This body has left me a long time ago. I can't buy off the rack. But I like subtle style, right? Like instead of a full double vent, I like a half or quarter double vent. My collars are not just spread, but maybe sometimes oversized.
So you're like
my buttons
really,
are hidden.
really into this.
Yeah.
Okay.
The nuance is, why have a tailor-made suit or shirt if nobody knows it? So the nuance is just a little subtle style that says it's different. So when you're looking at me, you see the style, you see the tailor-made piece, but it's subtle to you. It's not out there, you know, where you say, oh boy, God, he's got a zoot suit on or something. And that's more than enough for me to go to court and more than enough for me to sell my legal services. Because I think looking good is the first step to excellence.
Yeah, it's
and being perceived.
Yes,
as
perception, absolutely. So we're talking about the way that someone else perceives you, but when you dress, do you also feel like it gives you a higher sense of confidence? When you're going to enter the courtroom, you're like, you know what, I'm here, I've arrived. Do you feel that happens also?
Do I need something that gives me more confidence? Let me tell you something. I'm scared to death half the time. The confidence is cover. Sure, I like looking good. Like I dressed today for a purpose because I was going to be on your show, and I love and respect you, and I want your show to be excellent. You know what I mean? I've got media hits after this, and yeah, I think clothes is about messaging, right? And I'm all about messaging and all about name recognition. You know, I often when I talk to law students and lawyers, young lawyers, I ask them, do you want to be an ordinary lawyer or an extraordinary lawyer? And everyone says they want to be an extraordinary lawyer. And when I ask them, what does it take to be an extraordinary lawyer, they struggle with further answers. And for me, being extraordinary means being memorable. So everything I do, I want the messaging to be that I'm an extraordinary lawyer, that I'm going to be aggressive, that I'm going to be a problem for the other side. And there's nothing wrong with looking good while you're doing it. Winning is one thing, but looking good while you're winning is so much more fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I love, though, what you said, that being extraordinary is about being memorable.
That's right.
I really, really love that. And there's all kinds of different ways that we as individuals can be memorable, right? Sometimes it's personality, sometimes it's dress. Okay, so one of the things that I think about with you is that there has to be some stress in your life, right? Because you have all of these arguments that you have to create on behalf of your clients, and I'm sure at moments it's intense when you're going to trial. So what are you doing to reset and balance? Are there certain experiences that you incorporate into your life, or certain things that you splurge on to help to reset and balance things out?
I love new restaurants. Whether I win or lose, I'm going to eat and drink. I love tequila. I love excellent food, and sometimes too much. The other thing that I do is I love movies. I love film noir. A great Saturday for me, and it's very rare, but a great Saturday for me is to turn on the TV and go to Netflix or go to Comcast or go to TMC or to the movie channel and just watch old movies from the 30s, 40s, and 50s all day and all evening, because Hollywood tells us about our culture at the time. how women were treated in the 30s and 40s in the movies, how they were physically abused on camera, and that was acceptable, whether it was James Cagney taking a grapefruit, a half a grapefruit, and putting it in his paramour's face because he was angry, or putting a woman over a man's lap and spanking them, or better yet, how black people were portrayed in the 30s, 40s, and 50s with blackface, and how they were shuffling and bug-eyed and what have you. We cannot forget our culture and how black people have been treated. And the progression of movies brings us up to speed now. How gay people were portrayed, how sex was portrayed in the movies, and now we get to 2023 when many of the things in the past were completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
Hollywood reflects our culture and our times and our life.
Yeah.
And I like watching that.
So you're watching it not only for the entertainment, but you're also analyzing what
Yes,
you're watching.
very much so, because what will historians and our future civilization say about 2023,
Yeah.
about our political discourse, about our economic situation, about the Democratic and Republican Party, about our leaders, and how bipartisanship is undefined now. That's important.
Yeah.
You know, your purpose and my purpose in this life is to leave this space, this place, in a better place, make it better,
Yeah.
to leave it in a better place.
Yes.
If that's not your goal and objective, if you're not trying to give back and define how you've made it better, whether it's Lorna or Scott, then you're only living 50% of your life that God gave you. That's one of my mother's favorite sayings. You know, I love the idea in the Nation of Islam, and Minister Farrakhan is very controversial, but the one thing he says is, I don't have a problem with black people making money. I have a problem with black people not giving back to their community or being a bloodsucker. And so giving back from my upbringing, and just from Martin Luther King, you know, everybody can be special because everybody can lead. There's always something for someone to do.
Yeah.
And that drives my mission in life. Not just the money and the success and the trappings of wealth, but also how much am I giving back?
Yeah.
How much am I making a difference with my time and money? Every young lawyer and every law student in this country, if they reach out to me, they get a 1-hour meeting. And I give them everything I got in 1 hour.
Wow, that's fantastic.
I don't let them, I can't define their success or their goals and objectives. They have to put that plan together, and I'll help them. But if they do that, I make time for them on an ongoing basis. You have to make mentors mentor you, because I'm busy. I got a lot of challenges and stuff. And so I don't know whether any other lawyer in this country does that, but it takes a lot of time to do it, and it's important to me.
And I
Because
will
I got to
say
leave it a
also-
better place. I got to leave it in a
Leave
better
a better
place.
Yeah, I will say that you know, you're one of my clients. I know you to some degree, but and this is great for me to learn more about you. But one thing I do know is that you lead with generosity, and it is apparent and it is obvious that that is a part of one of the important tenets that you that guide you. So, let's talk summer and catfish.
What does that mean? Summer and
I read
catfish.
that summer is your favorite season. Tell me what it is about summer that brings you joy.
Well, it's not cold like Chicago and Joliet was growing up, that's for sure. Just the vibe, you know, getting in the pool and with a cigar and
In the pool with
a
the
drink.
cigar.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay, I'm getting
You
the vision
know,
here.
and just chilling out, smoking and drinking at home with friends or.
Speaking of consuming, let's talk catfish. So I read that catfish is one of your favorite foods. So what are we doing? Are we broiling it? Are we deep frying it? Are we doing it with potato salad,
Where did you read that
grits?
from? Boy,
Hey
you've done
man,
your research.
I've done my research.
You know, every
tell.
Friday night growing up, my mother and my Aunt Betty and my Aunt Beulah and my Aunt Lola and my Aunt Judy. Aunt Betty's still here, the rest of them are gone. They were all from Mississippi, migrated to Joliet, and they were my great aunts and uncles. And every Friday we would fry catfish, buffalo fish, and have it with spaghetti at my Aunt Beulah's home. And those were the fondest
Nice.
memories because it was a large group of people, 20, 30 people. Aunt Beulah and all my aunts were in their kitchen cooking and arguing with one another. Aunt Beulah didn't like anybody else being in her kitchen. I mean, she could burn it up, but she didn't like it. But her sisters had to be in there with her because, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they argued like cats and dogs. And as a young man growing up, I just loved it. I just loved being in that space and that energy. And I remember the catfish and the spaghetti with Italian.
Catfish and spaghetti.
Catfish and spaghetti.
Okay.
And we grew up Catholic, so we had to have fish. But we had catfish and spaghetti and bolognese and Italian sausage. My mother would make it. And it was great being in that space with my aunts and uncles and cousins. But one thing I remember, in Aunt Beulah's home, you couldn't just take one plate. Like, to show her your gratitude and to make sure she knew that you loved her cooking, because that was part of her brand.
Right, right.
You had to get a second or third plate. And overeating is a Southern tradition.
Yes.
And so it took a time for me as I got older, 30, 40 years old, and as I gained weight, because I was still psychologically overeating. God bless Aunt Beulah. She's not here anymore. But the food was just so good.
Yeah.
She made potato salad, and my uncles would go hunt squirrel and rabbit and coon and bring it to her house, and they would cook it and clean it. Oh my goodness gracious! I mean, now I've been married a couple of times, and the idea, the greatest meal from my marriages has been when I've been able to convince my wife at the time to cook squirrel.
Oh my God.
Or rabbit.
Okay, all right.
Or even
Now,
possum.
I will say I do have an appreciation for this growing up as a little girl in Louisiana.
That's right.
I get all of
That's
this.
right.
I get, well, the turtle, the possum,
I once had
the
a
gator.
birthday party, and the meal for our friends at our summer home were all foreign meats or all wild game. I had, what do you have it? I had.
Fun, that's a great concept.
Oh yeah. What did I have? I had buffalo, I had moose, I had rabbit, squirrel, and all these different meats that were prepared. God bless Erica Martin. I love you still. But she cooked it all up, and just, like maybe say, she didn't like cooking it up either, by the way. She did. She complained the whole time. But she did a wonderful job, and our friends were there, and we had a great time just eating these foreign meats that nobody had ever had before. Nobody had ever had all these crazy meats, wild game meats, wild boar and stuff, and I loved it.
Yeah,
I just
it sounds
loved
like
it.
fun. And I'm
absolutely.
gonna
You should
steal
try
that.
it.
I'm gonna steal that idea. Okay, so I have to wrap up. I could feel like I could talk to you forever, but
Okay.
let me get a sense of your insights a little bit more. In your opinion, is life more of a fairy tale, or is it hard work, or is it a combination of both?
It's probably a combination of both. I mean, asked another way, I always ask myself, is life good and the bad times are exceptions, or is life bad and the good times are exceptions? I think life is good, because if you make it good, you've got to choose happiness.
Yeah.
And nobody can make you happy. You have to choose happiness. And I've had lots of challenges in my life where I've chose happiness. My oldest daughter, I'm not going to tell her age, but she came into my life when she was 19, pregnant with my granddaughter. 19 years of absence from my life. That was my failure, our failure, if you will. But I've spent the next 19 years building an incredible relationship with her. And I often think about how absent or dormant my life would be without that experience, without having dinner with her and loving her and her being in my life. And my granddaughter, who's 21 and in the Air Force, stationed in Honolulu, and just, family's so important. I haven't always been good at family because I grew up, my father paid for everything, he worked, and that was not a problem. He didn't have to be home at 5 p.m. and stuff. He was a provider. And I'm just like him. I'm better a provider than being home at 5 p.m. But I've fallen in love with a jealous mistress, and that's the law.
Oh.
And the law has brought me very far in this life. It hasn't been compatible with family life or marriage, and I probably could be better in that regard, better balanced. But I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life juggle. And a juggler always drops something, but he picks it up and keeps juggling. And you as a woman, as a businesswoman, me as a businessman, we got to be okay with dropping one of those balls, right?
Yeah.
Because work-life balance puts so much pressure on us. But you pick the ball up and keep juggling and make sure your family and others around you understand it's okay to drop the ball because I love you and I'm juggling this thing to make a better life for you.
I love that. Love that. So, as we close, any other insights that you can offer to help lead people to an enchanted life?
Black people need to vote. Black and brown people need to vote in this country. It'd make the country a better place.
Yes.
Now, Roland Martin, my good friend, and I do his show on Wednesdays. He's got the Black Star Network and stuff. Incredible entrepreneur in the media. Roland says to me, black people and brown people do vote. They just need to vote more. Okay, he's right about that. We need to vote more because part of our political challenges and economic challenges in this country comes from us not exercising, or more of us exercising our right to vote. And if we do that, good things are going to happen for this country. And in 2043, it's estimated that this is going to be a country of color for the first time. That doesn't sit well with everyone, especially people that don't look like us. And so this political fight, this economic fight, I fear is going to turn physical. I hope not, but we got to be prepared. And one way to be prepared is to exercise your right to vote early and often.
Yeah, yeah. And coming from your background, all that you saw when you were a kid, you knew how many sacrifices occurred to make that happen, right?
Yeah.
Scott.
I think we gotten away from that a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
being
having
here.
me.
The time passed way too fast for me, but I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
And you heard it here. To have an enchanted life, A. Scott Bolden says that you have to make sure that you incorporate joy in your life, that you vote, and that is how you get to have an enchanted life and style.